For months, they promised us one thing: the impossible. World records would fall, limits would disappear, and humanity would finally discover what athletes could really do when the gloves came off. No restrictions, no drug testing, no rules. Just science versus history. At least, that's what they sold us. But after watching the first ever enhanced games, I think we got a very different answer. Because instead of witnessing the future of sports, we may have just witnessed one of the biggest reality checks in modern athletics. Think about it. This event was marketed as the Olympics without limits, the place where athletes could use every enhancement available, the place where world records were supposedly doomed. Athletes talked openly about breaking records, commentators hinted at history being rewritten, and fans tuned in expecting absolute chaos. But when the dust settled, 42 athletes had competed across 18 events. And how many world records fell? One. Just one. And here's the funny part. The athlete who broke that record already owned the record himself, meaning he basically got paid $1 million to beat his own personal best. Not exactly the revolution people were expecting. The deeper you look, the stranger it gets. Because if performance-enhancing drugs were supposed to unlock superhuman performances, where were the superhuman performances? In track and field, they were nowhere to be found. Not one athlete came close to a world record. Not one athlete produced the kind of performance that made people rethink what was possible. And somehow, it gets worse. Many of these athletes weren't even close to their own personal bests. Some had actually run faster years ago, in high school. Let that sink in. An event built entirely around enhanced performance featured athletes performing worse than their teenage selves. Let's talk about the headline event, the men's 100 meters. Because if any event was supposed to deliver fireworks, it was this one. Fred Kerley entered as the biggest name in the field, a former world champion, a proven elite sprinter. And after all the hype surrounding world records, people expected something special. Instead, he ran 9.93 in the heats, then 9.97 in the final. Good times? Sure, for a normal early season race. But this wasn't supposed to be normal. This was the event that promised to redefine human performance. And instead, the winning time wasn't even close to the world record conversation. What made it even more awkward was the reaction afterward. Kerley blamed repeated false starts for disrupting the race, and then took the opportunity to mock some of his opponents, basically saying they needed to train harder, which is certainly one way to celebrate winning an event designed to showcase enhanced athletes. But here's the thing, whether you love Fred Kerley or hate him, his performance wasn't shocking. Most track fans never believed the world record talk in the first place, because we've heard it before, every year. World record this, world record that. Then reality arrives, and the clock says something completely different. The women's side wasn't much better. The winning time in the 100 meters was 11.25. For casual fans, that might sound respectable. For elite sprinting, it's nowhere near world class. In fact, there are teenage athletes currently running faster. Teenagers, not enhanced athletes competing for massive prize money. Teenagers. And suddenly the entire concept started to fall apart. Because if the goal was to prove that enhancement creates unstoppable athletic performance, the results were telling a very different story. Now, to be fair, not everything was a failure. Swimming actually produced some impressive performances, including a world record. But there's a catch. A very big catch. The swimmers weren't just competing with enhancements. They were also using technology that had already been banned years ago. Those famous high-tech suits that helped produce dozens upon dozens of world records before being outlawed. So now you're combining enhanced athletes with equipment that was already considered too effective. And suddenly those performances become a lot harder to evaluate. Outside of swimming, the story was mostly the same. Strongman athletes attempted records, weightlifters pushed huge numbers. Some events were entertaining, some were chaotic. A few athletes walked away with enormous paychecks. But the overwhelming message remained unchanged. The promised revolution never arrived. And honestly, maybe that's the most interesting part. Because the event accidentally answered a question many people have wondered about for years. If athletes had complete freedom to use performance-enhancing drugs, how much better would they really become? The answer appears to be not nearly as much as people imagine. At least not immediately. Especially when you're dealing with retired athletes, aging athletes, or competitors who were never quite at the very top of their sport. Because drugs don't magically transform someone into Usain Bolt. They don't instantly create Michael Phelps. They don't manufacture greatness. Talent still matters. Training still matters. Genetics still matter. Years of development still matter. And that's what the enhanced games accidentally proved. For all the talk about chemistry, the biggest advantage in sports is still excellence. The boring stuff, the years of sacrifice, the relentless work, the obsession with getting 1% better every day. Now, does that mean performance-enhancing drugs don't work? Of course not. They absolutely can provide advantages. But what this event showed is that advantages alone don't erase the gap between good athletes and legendary athletes. And perhaps that's why the event felt so strange. Because it wasn't really about world records. It wasn't really about science. It was about curiosity. People wanted to know what would happen. And now we do. But here's the part that concerns me. Because despite all the criticism, despite all the memes, despite all the disappointment, the event still got attention. Lots of it. The athletes got paid. The clips went viral. The headlines spread everywhere. And that's usually enough for something to grow. Which means this probably isn't the last enhanced games. It's probably the beginning. And whether that's good or bad depends entirely on your perspective. For me, the biggest takeaway wasn't the lack of world records. It wasn't the awkward marketing. And it wasn't the disappointing performances. It was realizing how quickly performance-enhancing drugs are becoming normalized. Not just in sports, everywhere. Fitness culture, social media, influencers, even everyday conversations. The idea of enhancement is becoming more accepted every year. And honestly, that's the part I find most fascinating, and maybe the most worrying. Because the enhanced games were supposed to show us the future. Instead, they may have revealed exactly where we're heading. And whether that's progress or not, I'll let you decide. But one thing is certain. The first enhanced games didn't change sports forever. It changed the conversation. And that might end up being even bigger.